Welcome to the relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. This past weekend, Puerto Rico's own unbeaten up-and-comer in the women's bantamweight division, Crystal Rosado, returned to action and shined against Perla Lomeli in what was a bout scheduled for 6 rounds. 6 in the women's bantamweight division, just moving around, staying with Perla, but picking her off at the same time, being defensively responsible while she does it, getting under those sweeping hooks.
Counters.
She's got the look of a boxer puncher. Emphasis on boxer puncher. Not a pressure fighter, not a pure boxer, a boxer puncher who can box when she needs to, punch when she needs to.
Think Miguel Cotto. Think Felix Trinidad.
Fighters who can box and punch. That's Crystal. She shined in her last outing. In my previous video, I talked about how between Crystal being of Puerto Rican descent and having that fan-friendly style, she could easily become the star, the face of the bantamweight division in time.
It'll take time because she's still fighting in 6-rounders. I anticipate that in the coming year, she won't fight for a title, not yet, not a full-fledged alphabet title, because she still needs more bring-along to build her up to 6-rounders to 8-rounders, 8-rounders to 10-rounders.
At 22 years old, there's no need to rush, and in a very general sense, you never want to move a fighter too fast, even a very talented one like Crystal, because their body still needs to be conditioned. They still need to be acclimatized to fighting for extended periods of time and learning how to pace themselves over time to where you've still got something left in round 8, 9, 10.
Saw in Stephanie Pinedo's fight with Diana Tapia.
Stephanie Pinedo, Crystal Rosado's countrywoman, another fighter of Puerto Rican descent competing at a higher weight than in her last fight. I think that was Stephanie's first 10-rounder. You saw in the fight that she got off to a strong start, and she did win it in lopsided fashion, but she faded down the stretch because she's not used to fighting in 10-rounders. It was still a controlled environment.
Good learning fight.
That's what I'm talking about. You don't want to move a fighter too fast, because if you do, they could gas out at a very inopportune time. Now, Stephanie was able to come through that. Crystal Rosado is a lot younger than Stephanie Pinedo, so she's got more time to have more bring-along, more experience fights, learning fights. I think she'll spend the majority of next year doing just that. I don't think that Crystal Rosado should fight for a title next year. As strange as that might sound, for what is so talented a fighter, she doesn't need to rush.
If she's still fighting in 6-rounders at the end of this year, I don't get the sense that she should be fighting for titles in 10-rounders next year. You can build her up to those 10-rounders, but you don't stick her in there with a champion just yet.
You build her up to 10-rounders in 2025 so that she's ready to fight for a title in 2026. Get her 2 8-rounders with 2 gatekeepers, 2 journeywomen, and then 2 10-rounders.
Next year.
4 fights for a 22-year-old fighter that only has 5 professional bouts is just what the doctor ordered, and that's what you usually see at the start of a fighter's career. That's when they fight more often.
The most.
I think it was Mike Tyson that fought approximately 14 to 15 times the same year he went pro. He packed in that many fights in a single calendar year. When a fighter goes pro, in those early years, that's when they fight the most. That's what Crystal needs to be doing. Now, she doesn't need to fight 14 times in the same calendar year, but do you get the gist of it?
She needs as many fights, as much experience as she can get.
Congratulations to Crystal Rosado for advancing to a professional record of 5-0 this past weekend, and here's looking forward to an even more productive year in the coming year. Men's junior middleweight news. Beyond this upcoming weekend's fight, George Rose says, no, he wants that fight. Big twist, the $38 million Tszyu feud with Saudi billionaire. Tszyu's team will reopen negotiations with the most powerful man in boxing if he claims the IBF title next weekend. Convinced, Saudi billionaire Turki El Sheikh still wants a $38 million blockbuster with Terence Crawford. On the eve of Tszyu's second straight U.S. world title blockbuster, No Limit promoter George Rose has revealed $38 million showdown between Australia's boxing poster boy and American megastar Crawford will immediately go on the table after his client becomes the first man to defeat Russia's IBF champion Bakhram Murtazaliev on Sunday, October 20th. Speaking with Fox Sports Australia this week, Rose suggested Tszyu will not only become the name in the super welterweight division after defeating Murtazaliev, but stressed his bloody road back to the title means a blockbuster showdown between the two is now more lucrative than when talks between the camps first started a year ago.
Speak clear about a few things. I like Tszyu.
But his fight, his pay-per-view with Sebastian Fundora was not an according to Hoyle blockbuster, because when you say blockbuster, what you really mean is it sold a lot. Sold a lot of pay-per-views, brought in a lot of money. That fight didn't do that.
I like the kid, but that wasn't a blockbuster.
Not in the blockbuster sense of the word. George Rose added, the fight would also change the world boxing landscape forever, because it's going to be the day Tszyu ends Terence Crawford's legacy, and it is for all these reasons that the promoter is confident of smoothing things over with His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh, who, apart from having huge interest in Bud Crawford, claimed only 2 months ago he would no longer work with Team Tszyu as the fighter doesn't understand how things work.
Oh.
Rose said, a win over Murtazaliev would see talks immediately reopen for a Crawford fight already priced at $38 million, while also guaranteeing the world's #1 fighter the type of big payday he is craving. When Tszyu wins the IBF world title, he becomes the name in the division, Rose said, and we know Crawford wants the fight.
$38 million.
Where did George Rose get that number from? Is that where they priced the fight when they were initially trying to do it? At $38 million. That's a lot of money. We know that Turkey has it. You hope that it's not too late. You hope that even though talks didn't work out the first time out, that ship hasn't sailed. Because recently, Sebastian Fundora and Terence Crawford reached an agreement, a deal, that would allow Sebastian Fundora to fight somebody else and not Terence, who's his mandatory challenger. That Terence essentially had an avenue to fight for a title, 2 titles, in his very next fight.
And Terence let him walk.
Let's make it clear that Sebastian's the one who wanted Terence to step aside because he wants to fight a voluntary. He wants to fight somebody else.
But Terence let him.
I'm not sure why. Is Terence still focused on that Canelo Alvarez fight? Is that why he let Sebastian Fundora off the hook? George Rose continued, Tim just needs the belt, because once Timmy Tszyu has that second world title, it takes him to the top of every conversation in the division. And the division where right now, there are so many guys chasing greatness, fighters like Terence Crawford, Errol Spence, Virgil Ortiz, all these guys looking to win world titles create history. Plus, when Tim wins this next fight, Crawford is going to see all the hype that accompanies it. He'll see the spotlight is on Tszyu.
Sounds a lot like George Rose realized the most lucrative fight out there, the biggest bang for your buck fight for the biggest money, is the Crawford fight. Not a Fundora rematch.
Not a fight with somebody else at the weight. The biggest money fight at 154 is the Crawford fight. Hear everyone talk about him. So as soon as Tim wins that belt, the talks will increase. Rose also said he was confident of working with Saudi advisor Al-Sheikh and stressed a Tszyu versus Crawford headliner would prove a lucrative one for everybody involved. Asked about His Excellency's statement, Rose said that when they were made in August, his team was already focused on a shot at the IBF.
So that's why they didn't take the Crawford fight then.
A leverage play. Look, at the time of those quotes, Tszyu wasn't going to be Crawford's next fight because we already had a fight locked in, he said.
How is that a leverage play?
Because Team Tszyu want to approach the fight with Terence as champions, not just challengers, not just guys who aren't bringing something to the table. If they bring a belt to the table, they can then ask for more money. And we made that clear. Right now, Tim Tszyu is fighting for an IBF world title, and that's the best thing for him to do. But that doesn't mean we don't want to fight Terence Crawford. We want Crawford. We absolutely want everybody, and we'll work with everyone. We'll work with Terence Crawford and his team, and it's a day we look forward to, because it's going to be the day Tim Tszyu ends Terence Crawford's legacy. Pushed on working with Al-Sheikh, Rose continued, he said that he wants to make boxing's biggest fights, and he's been doing that. And now Tim Tszyu is set to become the big fight in the 154-pound division.
Crawford.
Which makes him a fight that Crawford will want. That's why he's become boxing's pound-for-pound king, because he has continually taken the toughest tests. And he knows Tim Tszyu is a massive challenge. While initial estimates put a Tszyu versus Crawford fight at around 38 million.
That's 38 million Australian. When you apply the conversion rate to US dollars, it translates to 25 million.
Rose suggested the Australian's growing profile stateside, thanks largely to his bloody war with Fundora, would only now make it an even bigger payday.
Crawford.
So while Tim Tszyu represents a huge risk for Terence Crawford, the promoter continued, now the money will be right for him. It will all make sense. Tszyu is now that guy.
Crawford.
Sounds to me like George Rose has got it all worked out in his head. For what it's worth, I hope that he's right. I hope that Turki Al-Sheikh is willing to revisit talks for a Tszyu fight with Terence as well. I hope George is right.
Crawford.
But it still feels like all of this is contingent upon Terence Crawford's continued interest in the junior middleweight division unless he is otherwise still focused on that Canelo Alvarez fight. And if Canelo comes around to that idea, if he's willing to oblige him, well, there goes the Tszyu fight. There goes unifying the junior middleweight division. At the chance to fight Canelo, you know what Terence would do.
He'll move up.
If he does, then all of this will have been a missed opportunity for Tim Tszyu. That you should have fought him when they first offered him to you, because you likely would have made more money fighting Terence than what you ended up making fighting Bakram Murtazaliev.
I hope it doesn't come to that.
I'm no longer interested in a Canelo versus Terence Crawford fight. I would actually rather see Terence stay at 154 and unify that division. If it boils down to preference, then that's what I would prefer.
But I ain't the one in charge. I ain't the one making the decisions.
People are drawn to him. He's gaining new fans with every fight, and the American boxing writers, they love him. Everyone wants a piece of him, and he's only going to win more fans, more belts, and attract an even bigger price tag. But the longer anyone waits, the bigger the risk Tim will be. That's why I think those discussions with Crawford will only increase as soon as Tim wins his next world title. It's first revealed by Fox Sports Australia in March. Crawford's camp have been involved in secret talks with the Tszyu crew from as far back as late 2023, with the Americans initially touting a bout last December against Tszyu, who was then WBO champion. The ongoing discussions hit an untimely snag earlier this year. However, when the Soul Taker was surprisingly upset when trying to unify the WBO and WBC straps by the towering American southpaw Sebastian Fundora, after starting the Las Vegas headliner strongly, Tszyu suffered a nasty head wound at the end of the second, forcing him to effectively fight blind for 30 minutes in what would eventually be a narrow split decision loss, the first defeat of his career. Al-Sheikh then attempted to make a fight between Tszyu and undefeated U.S. prodigy Virgil Ortiz. However, he was forced to withdraw after his head cut had not healed properly. Midway through August, he then ruled out working with the Australian again, although Team Tszyu are convinced that will now change with a world title.
So here's the takeaway. Most of this is just wide-eyed optimism that they'll be able to revisit those talks. This is how George Rose and Team Tszyu feel. But how does Terence feel? How does Turki Al-Sheikh feel?
You're saying that all you've got to do is get that IBF title, and that'll be enough to come back to the table. But Sebastian Fundora had 2 titles, and Terence let him walk.
Can't fight this feeling that these guys are counting their chickens before they're hatched and they're putting the cart before the horse.
Got any more quirky euphemisms?
The point is that all of this is coming from one side. We don't know how the other side feels. For what it's worth, I hope George is right. I hope they can rehatch these talks. I hope they can make this fight, because I think Tim is going to win. I think Tim is going to become a 2-time junior middleweight champion, and I would very much be interested in seeing Terence face him.
You turned down a fight with Bibble,
Absolutely lies.
a fight with Callum Smith,
Lies.
and a fight with Joshua
Lies.
Buatsi.
Lies.
About where these rumours might have came from, whether they're true.
Okay, cool. I don't know where they came from. I've got some speculation about where they might have come from. But in boxing, there's things that get thrown around all the time that are not true. I've only ever been honest. Lies. I've never turned down. Turned down is a strong word. I've never turned down a fight against no man. No person on this planet. In boxing, professional boxing is a business. And these fights don't just happen click of a finger. Again, fights either fights come to you or you go for fights. And then when that happens, there's a negotiation that happens, etc. Sometimes you agree terms, sometimes you don't agree terms. Turning down a fight is a massive word. I've never turned down no fight in my life. So you're telling me I'll fight better be in London when he's in boxing right now, he's the most, on paper, he's the most feared man in boxing. 100% knockout ratio in a lot of world title fights as well. I said, yeah. When that got offered to me, looked at the terms, clapped my hands, let's make it happen. I was excited for the fight. So you're telling me, when I was 18-0, novice in the game, I worked my way up to be #1 with the WBO. Cool, you're mandatory challenger for Kovalev's belt, but you got to go to Russia. Ooh, okay. Look at everything, everything's cool. Let's make it happen. So you're telling me I took them situations, but I've turned down other things that don't make sense. Like, you have to make it make sense. It's a negotiation that happens when terms can't be agreed. The fight don't happen. Fighters move on. Same thing I've done. You approach people, terms can't be agreed. One person not happy. It's taking too long. You move on to the next thing. So yeah, I don't.
Anthony says you have to make it make sense, as if that's hard to do. It isn't. A guy who took a lot of risks in the beginning maybe doesn't want to take as many now. He wants things to pay off, to pay better.
See?
Earlier this year, there was a story that Anthony rejected a fight with then-champion Dmitry Bivol. I happen to believe that story. Even if he is outright denying it, pay attention to how long it took him to do it. A 2-minute explanation for what only required a yes or no answer. Sounds like you rejected that fight because maybe you didn't like the money, or maybe you didn't like the sequence of fights that you were in. Anthony's coming off of 2 consecutive maintenance fights, 2 consecutive keep busy fights, and he's about to have another one.
This time on the boxer side of things, he's trying to split from Frank Warren.
If I had to guess why he would have rejected a Bivol fight, it's because, well, he's already been through the ringer. He's already been through the gauntlet with 2 of the more dangerous champions at the weight, and now he wants to take it easy. There's a lot of money to be made in the domestic boxing scene, the British domestic scene, and he stands a better chance of beating those guys than beating Dmitry.
It's not hard to wrap your mind around.
Buatsi's situation is a little bit more sordid. Maybe he stands to make more money having that fight with Joshua Buatsi on the boxer side of things than on the Queensberry side of things, which is why he's trying to split from Frank Warren.
Still, none of this is hard to understand. He says you have to make it make sense. I just did.
If they would have did the Joshua Buatsi fight before, between Boxer and Queensberry, that's a lot of hands in the cookie jar. But if it's just one promotion under one banner, and if it's Boxer doing it instead of Queensberry, you know, Boxer might be offering Anthony more money to fight under their banner.
That's how they got Joshua Buatsi and Lawrence Okoli to leave Matchroom.
No doubts that's how they're trying to get Anthony Yarde to leave Queensberry. Now, according to Anthony, he's a free agent. He's free to go where he wants to go. His next fight is under the Boxer banner, but Frank Warren just assured it's not over.
So we'll see.
And I ain't saying he's doing what he's doing out of fear, so much as his desire to get a bigger return, a bigger reward, because he's taken some big risks in the past, risks that other fighters have yet to take, and he wants it to pay off. That's what I think it is. It's about money.
I don't think he's scared of Joshua Buatsi or Callum Smith.
I think he wants to be paid a certain way, and that's what this is all about.